Looking to maximize your golfing potential? Learn how from one of the world's best golf instructors. Join today at wdglc.com.
Okay, it's Wayne D here, down in the lab looking at Gary Player, the most underrated player of all time. Underrated because he doesn't get talked about a lot. This guy won over 120 tournaments. He won 9 majors, same amount as Hogan. Why isn't Player studied and revered like Hogan? Who knows? Possibly some of it is due to his sort of in-the-face personality. He's not really that mysterious. He's still around. Had a great Champions Tour career. He won 6 senior majors and 19 other events. He made the cut at the Masters 40 years apart, 1958 to 1998. Pretty amazing. So I got a bunch of his swings, not a bunch, probably 7 or 8. So I thought I'd go through a few of them and just show you, pick out a few things that I think are really interesting about Player's swing. One of the things that he always did, watch the footwork here when the heels go up. So if I did this a bunch, it would just look like he's walking down the street. Very, very free and athletic. So from a guy that worked out and was strong as hell and built like a whippet, I mean, you would think that he would have his legs restricted like they do today, but not Player. He's up to left. And driving off the right. Now, watch the left when it comes forward. And I talked about this before. When the heel goes up and comes down, the guys that do it well, when they put it down directly without putting any weight on the front of the foot. And what that does is it takes the calf, the lower leg here, and it plants it and begins to spin it back. So that's pretty evident right there. And you know, people are talking about snapping the left leg. You're talking about Tiger's knee. Well, you know, Tiger doesn't have he doesn't own that knee snap. Look at Player's knee. Boom. Also, look at the foot. So anybody that says you got to keep your left foot flat through the ball, they're not watching Player. Another thing interesting in this swing is you'll see as I run it back and forth, if you keep an eye on his back muscles here and watch that club go sideways right there. Now, Player was a Hogan devotee. He studied Hogan and tried to get information from him. Hogan wasn't too forthcoming with his with his help.
Learn the pivot compression golf swing. Join wdglc.com today.
The famous story was Player got a set of Hogan's clubs, but he painted them over because he was signed for Shakespeare, and when Hogan found out, wasn't too happy. Player called him up for some advice, and Hogan told him to ask Mr. Dunlop. Anyway, it was something like that. One of those stories you've heard it a million times. Anyway, so one of the differences in Player's swing as opposed to Hogan was that Player's hands, let me find it down the line here, Player's hands didn't go up to the ball. they went down more. So again, let's take a look. So I'll mark the end of the grip. And there it is. There's the grip going this way. Not for long, and now it's going to start to, once it gets down here, it starts to move that way. Now, what that does is that puts his arm less in front of him than Hogan. And since it's less in front of him, he's going to make up for it by bringing his hands in lower. So here's the shaft plane, and if you ever wanted to find somebody who covers the shaft plane in the forward swing, this player. Oh, this camera angle's a little bit too out on the ball, but you can see it, how low his hands are there. Now, I've always thought that lessened the complication of the wrist movement through the ball. So as you watch his right arm, it's not falling behind him as much as when he tries to lower the shaft, and player brings the shaft in really, really deep. I did a comparison of him with Sergio, and they have a lot of similarities in their swing. But player's head movement through impact helps him lower those hands in there and go left with it. So I got a couple other swings that have a pretty good angle so you can see the shaft plane. Now this swing will demonstrate something interesting. Watch this one. How many times have you heard that a balance is everything? You know, if you can just finish balanced, you got a good swing, right? Well, what do you think of this one? The player didn't weigh very much. He wasn't very big. And he's playing against Nicklaus and Palmer. And they're pounding it out there. So he literally had to put everything into it. So he's not worried about a pretty finish. So watch this. I mean, he literally almost falls down. So you'll notice he had a really pronounced trigger move with his legs. And if you watch Rory McIlroy, you'll see the same thing. Players, as he kicks his right knee, he's counter-rotating his hips. But then, unlike McIlroy, he will drag the club, so the club's not moving, his hips are already rebounding, and now he starts. So this is what I would call a pivot-oriented takeaway, and it's something that I'm doing with my swing now, and I think it's a great idea. I think that the grip handle is going to move before the club head, and I'll find another swing here, and I'll show you how the shaft will actually bend a little bit. A player starts with his arms a little bent. He will tighten them up as he goes back. The club comes nicely up the plane. Again, if you look at Hogan from here, the right arm is a little bit, player's right arm is a little more in. And that's logical because he tightened it, straightened it. Here, at this point in Hogan's swing, Hogan would be more bent. Another thing that's different about player's swing is the use of his legs. I already showed you that other picture where his feet are moving around. So here we've got the straightening right leg. That's something you don't see anymore. Big gap in between the legs there. And again, you'll see the grip fall. Although in this swing, if you watch, not as much. About halfway to the ball. So if you watch the video I did on the top 20 players nowadays, you'll see that, some of the guys drop their hands and a lot of them don't. These guys would swing. All the great players will change around a little bit here and there and swing a little different. One thing player always did, and he'd probably catch hell for it if he was on TV these days. Well, he lowers his head. Oh boy, look at that. So again, a very, very deep approach. Look at that shaft over here, right? But still staying above his forearm, right on it. And look how low this thing gets. So if I draw this shaft plane line at impact and I run it back to address, you won't see that very often. It's like perfect. And that's about as cool as it gets. I mean, you wonder how a guy like this won 9 majors. Well, that'll do it. And a great short game and an amazing putter. Now here's another thing that I kind of find. I like this. I mean, this, you got to have a good body for this one. When that left forearm is rotated this way in the follow through, physically, I can't even do that. So the left side is so rotated out of the way that that arm can fold over from the elbow like that. It's pretty neat. Here's a cool swing. There's some really interesting matches on. They'll show on the Golf Channel called the Golf Challenge, where I think Palmer and Player played a bunch of different guys. Challenge matches. They've got some really nice shots. I think in this one they were playing Nelson and Venturi or somebody maybe. Another good swing here. So here we find some different leg movement. So it's pretty interesting that you would take a couple of swings if we put it next to this one. You'd have to figure that he's working on something here. He had to figure sometime, maybe I'll keep my leg bent a little bit, instead of this, right? But once again, I mean, he's underplaying on this one. And look how deep his hips are. This is the one I think I compared with Sergio, and it's got that odd looking setup, but this is an awesome swing. And you can see here that his hands don't fall as much back. Very cool. Now there's one that'll show the left foot. Now, I made a note of this before, but again, all the good players I see that lift their heel, when that heel goes down, let's say it starts here, watch where it ends up. It's forward because of the lateral movement And this is why the left knee always appears to round or bow. It's got nothing to do with moving the left knees per se. It's the fact that the heel is light even if it doesn't look up. This is driving, and by the time this moves and the heel gets down, the heel replants more this way. So when somebody says the guys are bumping their left knee, I don't think so. I think they're pushing off from the right. You can't start a forward motion but with your left leg. Got to come from the ground, got to come from the right. And there's that. You can see the hands forward at impact, of course. Alright, one of my favorite guys, Gary Player.